Dezz Asante here from the TechMuze Academy. Welcome back to another episode of the TechMuze podcast. As you know, if you followed me for a while, that last year I started inviting guest experts to come on the show and share their knowledge and information. I've also this year started inviting some of the TechMuze community members to come on the show and share some of their experience and knowledge and information. And today's no different. I'm actually the pleasure of chatting with the man behind some of the hottest tracks that have been out in the last little while, producer extraordinaire, Drew Drucker. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. How you doing?
Excellent. I'm glad you had the opportunity to spend a little time with us. We've not met before, so this is a pleasure for me as well to get to meet you. And I've been doing a little poking around on your website, and let me tell you, man, you've worked with some names. For those who are not familiar with you, just give us the 25-cent tour. Who are you? What do you do? Feel free to drop a few name bombs because I love that.
Okay. My name's Drew Drucker. I'm a recording engineer producer based out of Los Angeles area. Been in the game for over 10 years now. Started in the entry level as a runner and intern, moved all the way up, and now I've been engineering and working on projects with people like Wiz Khalifa and his entire camp. I've done some sessions with Lady Gaga. I've done some writing sessions here and there and do a lot of mixing sessions. Been working with Be Real a lot from Cypress Hill recently. So it's been cool to work with some legends and work with some up-and-coming artists as well.
Totally. Very, very cool. So you, from the sounds of it, took the sort of traditional route, I suppose, to get to where you're at right now. You said you started interning and, getting the coffee and ordering the pizza, I imagine, that type of thing.
Oh, yeah. Among other things.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I did 2 internships before I got like a runner position at Paramount Recording, which is the studio that I kind of learned my craft and made my way up the chain in that world of Paramount Recording Studios. They own Paramount, American, Encore, Track Record, Wilder. So they have a lot of rooms in Los Angeles. Okay. Most of them have SSL, so it was a good learning experience.
Very cool, yeah. So did you go to school for this, or did you just sort of jump in and see what happened?
I did do a trade program that was 9 months, and when I was going to the school, they were transferring from the tape and the hard disk recorders to Pro Tools. So I pretty much taught myself Pro Tools and in all of the digital workstation type technology.
Right.
But I did learn signal flow there. So basic level engineering. And then really on my internships and as a runner is where, hands-on is where I really learned most of everything that I know.
Right. And so from that perspective, from sort of getting your foot into the door, what did it take to start to gain the trust of people to, get your hands on a project, and to really start doing it and getting your reputation established,
Yeah, well, as a runner, you're pretty much, kind of the hand to the studio. So by doing all of your running tasks correctly. So if you bring back a cheeseburger and they wanted no onions, and there's onions on it, the likelihood of them trusting you with more serious things is not that high.
Yeah.
So, you kind of just have to do all the small things correctly over and over before they even learn your name, let alone the trust of letting you come into the room.
Right.
Because, I'd say, it took some time, but, just your overall vibe and demeanor is like also helped a lot. So just being chill, being cool, not being too quiet, not being too talkative, kind of just learning how to navigate.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Do you spend most of your time these days, well, in what capacity would you, like, are you primarily engineering things? Are you primarily mixing things? Is it kind of spread all over the board, and the production element as well?
Yeah, it's definitely spread out right now. I'm doing a lot of engineering and mixing still. I'm doing a lot of work for my client Burner. He does like 3-4 albums a year. So just working with him is busy enough because I'm engineering, mixing, and mastering his stuff all in one. So, and then I'm also producing a few of my own artists, producing some of my own music, and developing a TV show actually right now based on travel and music. So it's like an Anthony Bourdain, but instead of food, about music.
Really?
So going around, we shot the pilot in the Philippines and did a bunch of interviews, went to some guitar factories, went to some sound healing, some reggae sessions. So it was a real cool experience. So trying to do that all over the world, record and capture music and kind of show the music scene around the world.
And document the process. Yeah. And is this something that's going to be broadcast on TV? Is it going to be a YouTube thing, or what's the deal there?
Right now we're in the post-production phase of the pilot. So depending on what traction, the pilot kind of gets as far as when we start pitching it, that'll kind of determine the where it will end up.
Right.
Definitely want to try to get it to a network, but if it lands amongst the Netflix or even the YouTube atmosphere, it's totally acceptable to us,
Well, keep us posted, because I'd be very interested in that myself. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's called In Tune Out of Bounds.
In Tune Out of Bounds. I like it. I will look out for it. Absolutely. So, so needless to say, you keep yourself fairly occupied from the sounds of things.
Yeah.
Not a lot of downtime. One thing you mentioned that I was going to ask you about is if you are also producing your own music. You mentioned briefly that that's something you're working on. Is that something we can find somewhere?
Yeah, I have a project that I did with my production partner. We had a band called the BMMB. A couple of our members, they had other gigs that ended up taking their time, so it's kind of reformulated, but we do have an EP out. It's called Indian Cove EP, BMMB, which is short for Black Market Music Brokers.
Okay.
We still exist. Me and the production partner, Dominic, we're still creating and collaborating on projects, but as far as gigging, we haven't been doing that any time recently. We're kind of reformulating right now, something a little bit more compact and easy to take around.
Right.
Full band, it's a lot of moving pieces.
Totally. What sort of music were you guys working on? Like,
it was kind of like
a band thing, so there's a live performance.
Yeah, it was like an alternative kind of blues, a little bit of psychedelic aspect to it.
Very cool.
So, yeah, it was where we were kind of influenced at the time, and it was a fun project to do. So it's kind of got like a Doors influence a little bit, but a modern take on that.
Right. So and what's your role in that project?
I was doing production, and I did some vocals on that one as well.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
You play instruments as well?
Yeah, I play a little guitar, little keys, little drums. I'm not up to like session player caliber.
Right.
But, I grew up playing guitar as a little kid. So.
And you incorporate some of this into some of the work you do with folks? Are you laying guitar lines down here and there? Or
sometimes, more on the production aspect, where I'll be kind of, fixing the drums or beefing up the bass or adding more of a production element to it. I notice when you bring out the guitar in a session, then it's like you're adding something or you're changing it. And sometimes clients kind of have their, they like how the record sounds originally,
Yeah.
So bringing the guitar out kind of adds a new element where I can kind of still add that same creative space without having to, get too crazy. And I can like dig into the multi-track and replay something there or redo the bass line, and that helps bring the record to life.
Right, okay.
The same kind of style.
So having a few of those extra skills in your back pocket to pull out when needed, I imagine, is a helpful thing. I'm a multi-instrumentalist myself, and interestingly enough, you talk about, paring down your project into something that's a bit more portable, a bit easier to take around, and that's part of the reason why I play in an acoustic duo with my partner, Carol. So it's just the two of us, it's acoustic instruments, there's no drum kit to set up, we can be up and ready to go in 15 minutes anywhere. The whole sound rig is in the back of my car, and, we're pretty portable that way. It's a lot of fun. And we have a lot of fun with the whole performance aspect, and we've been dabbling a little bit more now with producing some music as well. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is, do you do most of your work in studio, or do you work at home a lot?
This is my production room right now. I do a lot of mixing and kind of pre-production here. I don't do a ton of recording except with like the artists that I'm developing here, just because of budgeting purposes. But I do get mixing done here, no problem. I have my full rig. I have Apollos and a bunch of analog gear, so I have that all set up. I'm actually in the process of getting a production space that I'll be able to even do more mixing and more recording out of, besides besides the big rooms too.
Right.
Love in the big rooms out of sheer just comfortability. It's like going to a hotel.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like there's a certain comfort to your home that's awesome, but when you go to a hotel, you just sleep extra good, or whatever about the bed. So it's kind of like the same aspect when you go into the studio. It's just that extra level of professionalism. It's not cheap, so you're not wasting it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So a lot of my listeners are a bit of gear junkies. So if you don't mind, give us a little bit of what you got going on there. You mentioned a few Apollos, so I imagine you're running the UAD plugin platform as well.
Oh yeah.
And what do you got for hardware?
I got a Manley dual mono mic pre that I use for most of my vocal tracking here. When I'm in the studios, I like to use a Neve. It seems to be what's everywhere in LA. I have two distressors, EL8Xs. I have a Fatso, Empirical Labs tape saturator.
Yeah.
I have a Purple 1177, a Yuri LA4A. I have two standard audio levelers, which are like these kind of distortion compressor units. And then I have two Avitas EQs. They're the E27. They're kind of like based on a API 550 EQ,
right?
But they have more bands, so it goes all the way up to 28K. So I like to add that sometimes on the stereo bus, but I track through that as well.
Right.
Yeah, and then as far as speakers, I got some Proax, running them through a Bryston. And I have some classic NS10s too. So
right. So I'm a little envious. I got to be straight with you. You got stuff in your rack that I have in plug-in form because that's what my budget allows.
Yeah, and then plugins. I mean, geez, I have too many plugins. That's like an addiction or something.
Yeah. I'm the same. See, I used to up until about a year ago. I used to work. My day job was in the local Long and McQuaid music store, and I worked in the recording department. And one of the perks from that position was we got NFR copies, free copies of plugins all the time. And because it costs them nothing and they want us to know about them so that we can better sell them, right? So I had quite the plugin addiction. Now in my quote unquote old age, I've kind of learned to pare things down and kind of, reach for my go-tos first and then reach for something else if it's not quite satisfying me, you know what I mean? But
I definitely get that.
Yeah, in my younger days, and perhaps you've experienced this too in the earlier years of, just plug-in crazy. I've got a signal chain a mile long on every track just because I want to throw everything in there, right?
Yep, definitely. And like you end up just buying bundles and only using part of the bundle, and
yeah, totally. I now subscribe to a very less is more strategy,
Yeah.
And part of that has to do with the fact that in my younger days as well, I wasn't necessarily working with tracks that were well recorded. And so it dawned on me, I don't know, a number of years ago at a certain point in time when I had one of my first opportunities to work on a really nicely tracked session to mix. Yeah. And I was like, I get it now. It's like all the work that I had been doing up until this point was not mixing, it was fixing.
Oh yeah.
Right?
That does.
Yeah, and when you don't have to do so much fixing and you can jump right into the mixing, oh man, what a pleasure that is. And so, we talk a lot about on this show, we talk a lot about, getting it at the source. Get it right, don't fix it later, and your job later is going to be much more enjoyable. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, especially with rap music, it's about the lead vocal. So if the lead vocal is messed up, then it's going to make your job so much harder. So when recording, making sure that vocal is the perfect level, perfect compression, not over compressed, not under compressed, not too bright. It all comes into play. Makes mixing just come together a lot quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you work primarily with hip hop music most of the time, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say the majority of my clients, when you start working with a hip hop client, and then they start bringing in a lot of their friends through, and then they meet you, and then I kind of just developed a lot of hip hop clientele, but by no means is that like the only thing that I do. Right. I also do a lot of R&B and pop music and alternative rock music and some electronic music as well.
Okay.
not like I don't make house tracks or anything like that, but like alternative kind of, Flying Lotus.
Yeah, okay. And do you have much of an opportunity to work with a lot of live instrument tracking, or is it primarily programmed productions with vocals?
I try to, when I'm working on my own stuff, I try to bring in the live element as much as possible, because I feel even when you add the live music on top of program tracks, it kind of just adds some depth to it that wasn't there before when it's just all in the box. But when I'm doing a lot of rap music, especially nowadays, it seems to be more production and loop-based static beats, where they're not really adding too many live instruments. It's mostly synth-based stuff. So the challenge there is to kind of take something with not a whole lot of movement, not a whole lot of dynamics, and then creating dynamics out of it.
Right.
So that's kind of the mix. That's the mix itself.
And the transitions from section to section, keeping the energy up and so forth, which in my opinion is where it crosses over from a technical task into an artistic one, into a creative one. I mean, you can you can learn which knobs do what and twist them all day long, but until you have that vision of the end product, I imagine that's really where the magic happens, I suppose.
It is 100%, and being able to hear a track and being able to create a bridge section or an outro section that wasn't there before. That's what I really like to do when I'm mixing, is just kind of take the elements and then deliver something that was like unexpected,
Totally.
But at the same time familiar to what the demo was, because you don't want the artist to get their mix back and be like, what song am I listening to?
Right. Yeah.
But if there's like a new section to it, as opposed to new music, you're creating other parts with the music that already exists, so they're already familiar with the music. I feel like in mixing, I'm doing a lot of cutting as opposed to adding.
Yes.
So getting rid of elements, dropping a hi-hat out for a section, or for example, or a piece of music, or the bass, or besides the obvious like hip hop style drops.
Yeah.
Kind of taking the elements and kind of restructuring them, so to speak.
Yes, to create that sort of the phrase I like to use is sort of the emotional journey for the listener, right? To get from the beginning of the tune to the end, as opposed to just a rhythm, the lyrics, and hope you enjoyed that, but to actually pull them along. And that's one of the things that one of the epiphanies, I guess you could say, that I had a number of years ago as well, because I am a very sort of tech-minded kind of guy. Like the science of things always fascinates me, and so when I first started getting into mixing, that's what hooked my interest. How do I manipulate sound? How do I manipulate the psychoacoustic impression of the music? Make something sound here, right? And then how do I put all of those things together? And then once I sort of kind of got my head around those technical things, then all of a sudden I had the ability or the opportunity to start to get really creative with it. Using automation, creating transitions from one section to another, and to really sort of consider the listener, not just the piece of music, but the listener who's going to be affected by it and where I want them to focus at what points in time. Is that something you spend a lot of time thinking about, or does that just sort of, flow out?
It's a little bit of both, as far as, when I'm doing panning, I'm trying to keep a conscious effort to not distract the listener too much with panning. Mm-hmm. So, when you listen to a Beatles record in the headphones, you're like, what the hell is going on? Because there's panning is like super crazy, and it's not even. And so when I pan stuff, I'm thinking from a listener's perspective of, let me make, if something is hard left, I need something hard right to offset it. If I have something real right, I need something real heavy to offset it. So from that perspective, I'm definitely trying to put myself in like the headphones, without putting headphones on.
Right.
So it's like, okay, how would this sound in headphones? Okay, how would this sound mono? Okay, let me make sure. And then as I'm working, then checking it later in headphones and making sure I'm working along. But knowing that most people are going to listen to it in headphones, or most people are going to listen to it on a laptop speaker, it's definitely something that I keep in mind when I'm mixing for sure.
So you use multiple points of reference when you're working on a mix? Like, do you have, a lot of engineers, myself included, I like to have a real lo-fi, almost mono set of speakers, sort of as my worst case scenario. I find that when I flip my mix to those, and I'm talking like, they're called LC693s. I don't even know what those are. You know, they're almost like the little speakers that used to be stuck to the sides of those big old fashioned computer monitors. You remember those?
Sure.
Yeah, that type of thing. And that gives me my worst case scenario, but it just gives me different information that sometimes, you know, my ears get a little fatigued. They get desensitized to certain frequencies. I flip to those little crappy speakers, and all of a sudden I'm hearing the mix in a totally different way, and I'm noticing balance issues that I didn't notice before. Do you use anything like this in your workflow?
Yeah, I use Fostex 6301Bs. They're like these little rectangles, like this big. They got a 3-inch woofer, something like that.
Okay.
Like tiny little woofer. I use 2 of them, even though probably mono would be fine. And I find they sound like shitty NS10s, and NS10s are kind of supposed to sound bad anyway. So,
yes.
You know, so it's kind of like they're more hi-fi than, you know, a laptop speaker or a computer speaker, just so they do have a little bit more body, but they at the same time they don't sound spectacular by any means. So.
Right. Yeah,
those work good for me.
What about reference mixes? Do you use that in your workflow? Because I find sometimes, you know, you get really deep into a mix, and sometimes you miss the forest for the trees kind of thing, and sometimes a reference mix will just freshen up your ear and go, oh right, the kick drum's supposed to feel like this. Okay, is that something you do?
Oh yeah, definitely. And certain projects I like to reference certain other stuff, and also clients knowing, like my clients here. If they like a certain kind of mix, then it's like, let me reference this mix so I can deliver them something that they want to hear.
Yeah.
As opposed to something I want to hear, which was a learning process in itself of, like, you know, delivering what the client needs as opposed to what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know? Totally. Because that's what they're paying you for.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you know, using references in that way, it's like, you know, it's important to also know what kind of stuff is popular if you're working in pop-based music. That way, if you hear a client trying to do something, you can kind of like already know what they're referencing, so you can kind of, without asking what inspired them,
right?
Like dig into that genre or that style and find a mix that you like, and then kind of reference stuff from that perspective.
Totally. And this is in an attempt to deliver something appropriate to the client. What about when you're working on your own music? Because this is where sometimes it's interesting, because there's the job, there's, you know, the job that you do, and then there's the art, the creativity of it, and sometimes those things work together, and sometimes they're separate. But when you're working on your own music, like, are you like? 'Cause this is where I would imagine, you know, innovation might happen, where you're not too concerned about delivering a product to a client, because you are the client, and you can kind of go off road and outside, you know, color outside the lines a little bit and experiment and stumble on new and interesting things. Is this something you spend your time doing at all?
Oh, definitely. And with the artists that I developed too, that allows me to really dig into those different new techniques and trying new plugins and you know, doing something weird on a vocal. Even though I might just be experimenting, I'm going to probably taper that back. When you're in the room with somebody, you can't really do that. You know? Mm-hmm. For example, I was working with Burner recently, and he had Quavo from the Migos in there, and he did a part, and I was trying to make like a part extended, and I was tweaking the vocal, and he's like, don't mess with the vocal, man.
Right.
I really want his vocal. You know, so it's like, because the client is present, you know, experimenting kind of isn't a focus. You kind of want, you know, what that person does. But if I were to have more time with it, you know, then I might have experimented a little bit more, and I could have still delivered something that the client was happy with, but also something, you know, pushing the boundary a little bit more at the same time.
Absolutely.
But, you know, it comes down to delivering like your clients what they want. And so when I'm doing my own things, I'm just taking it all the way there, and you know,
getting experimental, getting innovative. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's where you learn how to bring in, you know, I could spend an hour going crazy on something, and that last 5 minutes is where I found a new technique that I can now implement in regular mixing.
Totally.
As opposed to just this science experiment, that I was working on.
Yeah, you're essentially adding new tools into the toolbox kind of thing,
Correct.
Which is interesting. Like sometimes, obviously, we can acquire new tools. I'll just continue with that analogy. From learning, taking a course, watching, Pensado's Place or whatever, and then other times they just sort of erupt out of the process. Out of experimenting and the happy accidents. Right? You stumble on something and it's like, oh, I can use this anytime to achieve that effect, and I've just discovered it myself. Which is not to say that nobody else has discovered it either, but you came to that learning or that understanding just through the process of being creative and experimenting, I suppose, right?
Oh yeah.
So
definitely.
how much of what you do is spent in direct contact with your clients? Like how much of this, because I know I've talked to a few producers, a couple on the show, in fact, and a lot of the one recurring theme that seems to come up is that a large part of the job is dealing with people, is
Right.
the whole social dynamic element, making sure people are in the right mindset to give a good performance if you're tracking a vocal or whatnot. How much of what you do is in that capacity?
Great deal. Certain clients, they rely upon me to book the studio, to call studios, to call producers and get the files, organize everything, mix everything. So a lot of it is just dealing with the artists themselves and their current mind state. If they have something in their personal life that's stressing them out, that's definitely going to affect the session. So for the better or worse sometimes. So you really want to make sure that where your client is at all times,
right,
mentally, before you assert yourself.
Right. Yeah, I suppose so. Have you found yourself in a situation where you've just put a session on hold because you knew you weren't going to capture the magic that day, or?
Yes and no. There's been times where an artist will be like, I need to take a break, and they'll go leave, come back. There's definitely been times where I've worked with artists when they've been sick or something like that, and they literally couldn't get it out. So yeah, you have to postpone those kind of sections.
Right.
You try to push through it as much as you can, but if you can hear it, you can hear it.
Yeah. And no amount of mixing techniques is going to fix a bad performance if the performance isn't there. Well, and this is something that we all inevitably learn at some point in our skill development.
Definitely.
So, okay, one thing I wanted to ask you too, specifically because you do a lot of work with vocals in the genre that you find yourself working in a lot. What's your sort of go-to vocal chain on a tracking session?
For tracking, pretty much exclusively, I'll either use a Neve or a Manley mic pre.
Mm-hmm.
Manley when I have my own mic pre, but typically I'm using a Neve in most of the studios just because that's what's everywhere, either a 1081 or a 1073.
Okay.
And then I'm going into a distressor, and that's pretty much it as far as vocal tracking.
Okay.
I keep it minimal because I want to be able to repeat the chain in any room that I go to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There's a lot of studios that's like, oh, we like working in that room, but it's booked this week, so we go to another room, and every single 1176 sounds different. Every single one. Especially the old ones versus the new ones versus ones that have been in smoky environments versus ones that haven't been repaired forever. So the consistency of the distressor is just why I go to the distressor every time.
Right.
And if there was a CL1B in every single room, I'd probably use those more. So my main thing is being able to have a consistent vocal chain. As far as the mic goes, when I'm in a big studio, I like using Telefunken 251. If the 251's not available, a 67, U67, also awesome.
Yeah.
If that's not available, sometimes a C800, and then sometimes a U87 as well.
Okay.
I also like a RE27 on certain vocals, or RE20.
Yeah.
Those sound good.
Do you spend time auditioning microphones with various artists, or do you pretty much hear what they sound like and kind of know what to reach for?
More pretty much know what they sound like, if it's for rap too, the artists are switching out. So they're like another artist is hopping in the booth. You're barely changing the attack and the release on the compressor, let alone the microphone.
Right.
So, if I had a project that I was like going to do a 2-month long recording and every producer and we're going to have musicians in there, yeah, then I would. I think it's project specific to where, you're going to be doing like a mic shootout on the vocal.
Right.
A lot of places you kind of they don't have the time to do that, and they feel like once 4 bars of vocal testing is gone, they're ready to record. So,
yeah,
time is not the luxury in most rap sessions to do a vocal shootout. Unfortunately, I would like to do more of those, but as of now, it's kind of just sound good. All right, oh shit,
yeah, go. Yeah, ready, fire, aim, kind of thing.
Yeah.
What about what about during your downtime? Like, because you do this kind of work for a living, do you still find yourself interested in getting creative on your downtime, or is it kind of like, okay, I've been making music all week, I'm gonna drink a beer and watch a hockey game or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's when I first started, I'd come home after a session and make like 5 beats, just from the inspiration alone. And now it's kind of, and when I first start, you're creatively not as in it. You're more helping. So as the helper of the session, you have like all this bent up creativity that you need to get out when you're done. So as the assistant engineer or the runner, you're kind of just on the sidelines a lot of it. So that when I was in that space, I'd come home and I'd get on it. I'd start writing beats. But when you're like 14 hours behind a computer screen mixing, the first thing I do when I come home is not like open up my computer to start mixing more.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I'll do it doesn't turn off, so like the research is constant. I'm like always like looking for new music and like studying like music documentaries and reading articles about new gear and stuff like that. So it's kind of more switches to a research level,
right?
As opposed to like going home and writing a bunch of songs. But if I have some time off, that's kind of when I start dedicating more time to the projects that I'm, developing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So most of the time in your downtime, it's skill development. It's adding more tools to the toolbox, as we were describing earlier, and new things that you can bring back to the next project. That's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah. So what are you working on right now currently? Anything you can talk about?
Yeah, right now I'm working with this artist named Madeline. Her project's almost done. It's going to be an LP that's dropping February 18th, so it's just right around the corner. It's kind of like a trippy R&B type of,
okay,
along the vein of like The Weeknd and Miguel style R&B,
Okay.
A little more, girly content, but it's, it's definitely it's a real cool project. A lot of cool textures. Did a lot of production on that, mixed the whole thing. So
very nice. Yeah, perhaps we can get some links I can put in the show notes so people can check out some of what you're doing. Some of your band too. I'd like to hear some of that, especially because it's outside of the genre that you normally find yourself working in. Right. So I'm kind of curious to hear how you approach that as well, and working with other musicians.
Yeah, we're kind of reformulating now with just the duo. So it's going to be kind of like an alternative rock style of music, but not like guitars on stage. So kind of more of an electronic delivery. Something just trying to push the boundary a little bit,
Sure, yeah.
But so still a song structure of like an alternative rock song, or in the vein of rock and roll, but not sounding.
A little bit of a fusion, I guess you could call it. Definitely. Nice. Yeah. So when do you think we're going to see you on Pensado's place?
Hopefully soon, man. I'd love to come Pensado's place.
Yeah.
A couple of the guys that I kind of like learned how to engineer from when I was like coming up in the game, they actually worked under Pensado back at the old Enterprise Studios in North Hollywood.
Okay.
One of the engineers at Paramount, his name was Scott Elgin. He was an assistant and runner back then for Pensado, and I worked with this other dude named Ariel Showbaz. He had a room at Encore when I was a runner, and he kind of taught me some things, let me kind of check him out, shadow him on some mixing, and he was an assistant for Pensado as well. So, it's only a few degrees of separation there.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if I'm like OG enough to be on it yet.
Right.
That, hopefully getting there.
Got to pay your dues. Well, I'll tell you what, you got some notable names on your credit list. I was poking around on your website, which I'll leave a link to in the show notes. And I'm scrolling down through the page, and I'm like, and I'm personally, I don't even listen to a lot of hip hop. It's not the genre that I really dig into, right? And I'm like, I know this guy, I know this cat, and then I'm like, Lady Gaga. What did you do with Lady Gaga? What was your role there?
It was as an engineer, I'll get calls from studios from time to time. And this studio was in Malibu, and she was it was a cover of like a Chic song, Nile Rodgers.
Okay.
And it was for American Horror Story.
Ah.
So it was for when she was on, she did a song that was a cover that was for the TV show. And I got to work with the producers and her, and she posted like a video of us in the studio with no audio. So like I got all these phone calls like, Lady Gaga just posted a video of you. I was like, oh shit.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, so but she was awesome to work with. She's like super, super talented singer.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes her productions and her albums take away from like the raw, genuine like singing talent that she does have.
Right.
It's so like pop,
Yeah.
And so when it's pop, it's so polished that it loses some of the authenticity, and I think that she's going to be here for as long as she wants to, because she just has that level of musicality, and she just knows the greats, studies music. She knows what she's doing for sure. It was a good experience working with her.
Yeah, and a nice name to have on your credit list.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. I hear what you're saying about the whole polished pop production thing, and sometimes, it's one of my favorite things is to listen to an artist who's normally presented that way do something sort of acoustic and intimate and interactive. I remember, I believe it was, what's his name now? Live from Daryl's House. Do you know the show?
Oh yeah, Hall & Oates.
Yes, yeah, and I really thoroughly enjoy that show because it's very, I mean, it's a band style production, but it's oftentimes very sort of toned down, kind of intimate and interactive. I actually saw, I think it was CeeLo Green in that context, and then the other guy who I saw was T-Pain, with just a piano player and himself on a microphone without all the crazy auto-tuning effects and all the production tricks and techniques. And I was like, man, this cat can sing. Like, why is he doing all this stuff with his voice in these records? Because the man can sing.
Yeah.
I
feel like, there's a level of maturity when like an artist gets into the 40s or 50s range, they can kind of start taming it down a little bit on the production.
Yeah.
So it's in the, I heard some of Gaga's demos when she was just singing and playing piano, and she recorded on my iPhone. I was just like, holy shit, like, just put it out like that.
Yeah.
Just record you playing piano and then like hire somebody to do an orchestra behind you, and boom, that's it.
Totally. Yeah. I seek that stuff out. I really enjoy that. Sia is another one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Just give her a microphone and a piano player, and that's all you need.
But when you hear their records, they're like these, Jerry Bruckheimer films. Yeah. But the music version.
Yeah.
And everything, all of the polish and all of the tools, So I feel like, sometimes, in our job, you can take away from the song as opposed to just adding to it,
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose there's different strokes for different folks. Like there are different types of musical products, right?
Yes.
And there's obviously a large market of people who really enjoy that polished stuff, or else it wouldn't be so popular.
No, yeah. And it works good for, all things commercial. Like, so it's like if you need to sync it to films, you need to do this, it's already ready.
Yeah.
So it's like, something real raw might not work as well in other aspects of,
different ways you might use that product. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So in order to play the Super Bowl, you got to have like some certain energy to the record.
Yeah.
know, where it's like you could make a ballad out of the same song, and it wouldn't be able to be performed on that type of, you know,
totally.
stage.
Different products for different, you know, consumers, I suppose you could say, right? I want to be respectful of your time, so I won't keep you too long. But one other thing I'm very curious about is from an engineering perspective or a production perspective, who are some of the people that you look up to in terms of the quality of their work, whether they be mix engineers or what have you?
As far as like, you know, mix engineers I look up to, obviously Pensado, we mentioned earlier, you know, he just worked on just legendary records, and that's kind of what I'm looking to do is work on legendary music, you know.
Sure.
I also like Manny Marroquin. His mixes always sound great. Spike Stent, his mixes sound really good. I always like how Kendrick's music turns out, you know. His stuff always sounds real good as far as rap records are concerned. Dr. Dre,
right?
He's one of my favorite engineer producers because he's someone I look up to in a sense where he kind of holds all the hats, you know.
Yeah, he's an all-around legend kind of thing.
Yeah, so he recorded the NWA stuff and produced it, so I really look up to that level of like skill set, you know.
Right.
As far as somebody who's like can do everything, you know.
And as far as a piece of music is concerned, what's can you bring to mind anything you've heard recently that just caught your ear? It's like, ooh, I have to rewind and hear that again. Like, what is going on in here? Is anything that's really jumped out at you lately?
I guess the new Glass Animals album is pretty awesome. That's like a kind of an alternative indie band. The new Bon Iver album is pretty sick. That one sounds crazy. The new James Blake. I like the new Weeknd stuff too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of good new music coming out lately. That's for sure. You
pull inspiration from this stuff and put it into your own work, like consciously, or does it kind of just happen organically?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna do a record like this, or I'm gonna use this style, and then sometimes it just like kind of it rubs off on you. You
totally.
know?
Yeah. There's this sort of growth through osmosis kind of thing that happens organically, naturally, assuming that one is constantly immersed in the music, right?
Yeah. Like a good example of that for me is just heavy bass music. You know, so I just notice I'm just making heavier bass because I work with like a lot of trap music and a lot of different rap stuff. So I'm just putting more bass in my stuff, you know.
That seems to be a trend.
Yeah, that's kind of like what's been like rubbing off on me. It's just like a shitload of bass.
Every now and again, I find myself in what I like to call a YouTube rat hole. And over the last couple of days, I got into a YouTube rat hole on beatboxing, the world of beatboxing, right?
Really?
Yeah. And I realized that first of all, there's quite a subculture surrounding this that I had no idea about, and also the bass. It's being able to produce the deepest bass sound with your face or your body somehow is really sort of what a lot of people are striving for, and that's where all the innovation is coming. It's pretty interesting. I'd like to learn one day. I'm a drummer myself, and I was joking around with a friend the other day saying, if I could drum that good with my face, you'd never get me to stop. You know? But it's all about that bass, they say.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah, man. Listen, brother, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, share a little bit of your knowledge and experience with the TechMuze community. I hope to link up with you on Facebook. If someone wants to get a hold of you, you know, say thanks or whatnot, where's the best place to find you?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the same tag at Drew Drucker. So.
Okay, very good. And obviously, drewdrucker.com if people want to check out the projects you've been working on, see your impressive and growing credit list, which is very cool. Congratulations on the successes you're having.
Thanks, man.
DrewDrucker.com. Listen, man, I appreciate it. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. One of the things I love about doing this show, I've been doing it for a few years now, is just the ability to make connections with folks like yourself. You know, like yesterday we'd never met. Now we've had a conversation, and, you know, hopefully we can carry that on into the future. And I will be crossing my fingers for you to see you on Pensado's place sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
No problem.
Right, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate yours. Thank you. And again, we'll stay in touch.
All right, sounds good.